I get my message across safely by preparing myself, understanding the people that I'll be sharing it with, and so I tweak it to the audience. I get it across safely, number one, to protect myself, and number two, to protect the people in the audience, and I do that by engaging my defence mechanism, which is a lot of humour, and I utilise that humour to try and break down that stigma, that taboo subject, and then discuss, like human beings, the value of lived experience. I learnt very early on as a media tart that preparation is the key to success. So understanding the right things to say, understanding what not to say, using mind frame and the specifics of stories and details. So I tend to generalise my story so that it doesn't lose its impact, but also that it doesn't cause any negative impact to those that might be reading or listening or watching.
I'm a bit of a bugger at times. I just say it how it is, but I know we've got to be very mindful about how we phrase things, how we talk to people, and I think it's to make people feel comfortable that I'm not overpowering, I'm not overburdening. I listen to them and what they want to tell me, and if I can share things with them in a safe way, yes, I will. Yes, I do a lot of planning. I'm a bit of a visual person, so I like to have, for example, if I'm speaking to a group, I like to have a PowerPoint there where I can show them some of my experiences in real life, so a picture's worth 1,000 words. And I also like to put a little bit of comedy in it, because it's not all about doom and gloom. There is some lighter things in your life. But I prepare with that. I write the story, I read the story, I know my resource, shall I say, so that when I do front an audience, I've got it there. I know I can speak it pretty fluently.
Working with Roses in the Ocean and attending seminars by Mindframe, we've learned about the importance of the language that we use and the guidelines that we need to put around the lived experience. So we don't talk about method, and we're very careful about making sure that the message is always positive. Before we launched the podcast, I had a little bit of doubt myself about whether we would trigger people and whether it was something that I really needed to go through with. After being at a breakfast on World Suicide Day, we had a speaker from Mindframe there, and the speaker went through the importance of the language that we use and the way that we talk about our lived experience. And by the end of the breakfast, I was totally convinced that we were doing the right thing and that we could do it safely, and we were able to look after ourselves and any listeners. Because once we went on the podcast, we had no control over who would listen to it or whatever, because once it's on the internet, it's out there forever. People could download it, broadcast it, do whatever. So we had to make sure that before we did that we could know within ourselves that we would be able to do no harm and only do good.
There's absolutely things that I do personally to get in the motion of preparing for a story, preparing to share it with an audience, sharing it with a room, and also sharing it with media. And some of those things is taking the time out to check in on your own state of mind. That's really important, because you're the one who's delivering it and you want to get your message across, but in a safe environment. Some other things that I do is I do share my story with my mentors to ensure that my wording and my language is something that people will feel comfortable, and that I haven't necessarily overstepped a boundary or used language that isn't in line with the Mindframe's setting. Also, I make sure that I talk to other people involved in my story and say, this is what I am going to talk about. Are you comfortable with that? Because we never want to make a person feel like they've been outed, that they're uncomfortable with their story being shared as well. So there are a few things that I do, but then after I've spoken with whoever the audience is or the media, I also then go back and reflect on it and say, great, what can we change for next time? You know, how did you feel about my story? And chat about things like that as well.